Okay, you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPP at 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHW WPPM. Excuse me. Tonight we'll be joined by Vanessa Maria Graber to discuss major events in the mayoral campaign this week. Our own Lance Haver will discuss recent developments in the water rate hearings. And we will have interviews with Jeff Brown and Maria Quiñones Sanchez. And both of those are important because Maria Quiñones Sanchez just recently dropped out of the race. So we have a long discussion with her about that. And we have a shorter discussion with Jeff Brown about last night's debate. And I'd also like to bring in, before we get to that, Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Good to see you. And we have a lot to talk about right at the top here. Lance, how are you this evening?
I'm fine. I'm looking forward to hearing the interviews and hearing your thoughts on the debate and whether you agree with the Philadelphia Inquirer that said former council member Sherelle Parker was the winner. I was surprised that they didn't pick their endorsed candidate as the winner, that they picked a candidate they didn't endorse. But I'm curious to hear what you're saying.
Yeah. And I'd also like to bring in Vanessa Maria Graber, who's been a contributor for us attending mayoral debates. And she also is going to be part of this conversation when she hears the conversation we had with Jeff Brown. But before we get to that, Denise, can you set the stage for us? What was the controversy from last night?
Well, if you hang out on Twitter, for any length of time, you will occasionally see a meme of Michael Jordan saying "F them kids," when that people plug in for various reactions to things. Basically, last night, the perception was that Jeff Brown pretty much said that to the entire city of Chester. There was a question about how we dispose of trash in the city. And I didn't notice until last night that we send our trash to Chester. I just thought that Philadelphia had its own landfill. But we apparently send our trash to Chester. And, folks were asking about environmental racism, which, contrary to rumor, is a thing. And what, Brown's response was basically, I don't care about Chester, I care about Philadelphia. And, if they didn't want the trash business, they shouldn't have bid for it. Now, anyone that's been to Chester knows that it is to Chester County what Philadelphia is to Philadelphia County in terms of poverty. I recently went to the Chester Transportation Center, and I saw that not only were folks dumping trash, someone dumped an entire bedroom set behind the SEPTA station in Chester. So, we're talking about a place whose downtown is next to non-existent and has, while they're on a smaller scale, has a lot of the problems that Philadelphia has. So to hear from, its neighbor to the south, we don't care, to the north, I'm sorry, that we don't care about you, from one of the people who is projected to be a front runner in the mayor's race. I don't know. If I'm Thaddeus Kirkland, the current mayor of Chester, I'm looking through my Rolodex and saying, we need to have a talk.
And then there was another controversy that was brought up last night that we asked Brown about today.
Yes, it regards everybody's least favorite topic or most favorite topic, depending on your feelings about it, the proposed 76th place stadium. Apparently, Jeff Brown, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer yesterday, has kind of gotten into trouble with the ethics board because they sued him for coordinating with a super PAC that is working to get him elected. They're running ads for him. They're raising money, and under the campaign finance rules, you can have a super PAC. You're just not allowed to coordinate with them in terms of campaign advertising or sending out mailers or anything else. They're allowed to do what they do while you do what you do. It's just on your behalf. And according to the ethics board, there's been some coordination. And another thing that came up is that one of the donors in this super PAC was a sports team. Now, the Philadelphia Phillies, they're probably not even thinking about moving away from Citizens Bank Park anytime soon. The Eagles, they love Lincoln Financial Field. It fills up all the time. The Flyers are cool at the Wells Fargo Center. And if it's up to the folks that run the Wells Fargo Center, the Sixers will stay there too. So since those three stadiums are already, have teams that are happy to be there, there's only one outlier, and that's the Sixers. And the speculation is that they're the sports team that contributed to this super PAC. And considering that, one of the things that, has become a controversy in this race is how you feel about the development of a Sixer stadium in a Chinatown that has made it very clear that they don't want it there. This kind of makes people, ask some questions that, to be brutally honest, I'm not sure Mr. Brown was all that prepared to answer.
I would say I was a little surprised about the ethics board. It seems that it's all right to buy the election, but it's not all right to have someone buy the election for you. I just wish there was, I think we're going to hear from Maria later on, but the ethics board is completely silent about someone buying the election with their private wealth, completely silent about dark money supporting other candidates, but all of a sudden speaking out because someone talked to someone else. I wish it was uniform. I wish it was across the board. I wish we could put an end to the auctions and go back to elections, which is what the American democracy is based on.
That's true. But you'd have to get rid of a Supreme Court decision called Citizens United, because that is what's allowing all of that.
Mm-hmm. So we talked to Jeff Brown today, and part of our conversation, Denise asked him about these topics, and here's what he had to say.
Hi. Well, again, thank you for joining us. And before we let you go, we would be remiss if we didn't ask a couple of questions about last night's debate. Particularly, one of the questions that you were asked was regarding the incident. Well, I guess it's an issue that a super PAC that is supporting you is having in court right now, and the fact that it's being sued by the Board of Ethics. Is there anything? I guess did you have to get a lawyer for that, or are you yourself in trouble because of that? Can you talk a little bit about that and how it's impacting your campaign? Because I'm still seeing commercials from that organization on your behalf on television. So
yes.
Has that impacted you at all?
Yeah, let me give you some information on that. One is I don't coordinate with a independent expenditure, so I really don't know what they do or how they do it. They operate completely separately of me. I'm not aware of. My understanding is they stopped spending money, and they're not committing to any new expenses. So if there's commercials, it might be old commercials, but they may be commercials from our campaign, which we're still spending money. And as far as the court case, I believe they followed the law in every way, and that's my belief from what I understand. and I believe that they will be victorious in court. I think this is, and I said it last night, I think this is more politically motivated. It has to do with my opponents sort of ganging up on me and not wanting the kind of change that I'm presenting. And because I'm leading in the polls, you know, that they're using this as a political strategy. But at the end of the day, I think you will find that we followed all of the rules and we didn't do anything wrong on any side of this effort. And it has nothing to do with me personally or my political campaign, because this is a completely separate operation that I don't coordinate with.
Now, and
by the way, 3 or 4 other candidates also have independent expenditures. So I'm certainly not alone here. Almost every leading candidate has it.
Now, I don't think that there's any way I can ask this that doesn't sound totally flippant, but have you heard from anyone in Chester today?
I haven't, but let me say this. This was contracted not by me. It was historically contracted. Chester wanted the work. They bid for it and got the work. If they don't want to do this work. I mean, they built the infrastructure to do this work. If they don't want the work, they shouldn't bid on it in the next contract. But, you know, I obviously had no involvement in this. And I care about the Chester people, but if I'm mayor, I have to protect the Philadelphians. And, you know, it's Chester's decision what they want to do. And I guess they thought this was a business opportunity and they pursued it. And apparently it's a big revenue generator for them. And if they don't want to do it, they shouldn't do it. If they do want to do it, it should be their right to do it. It's the citizens of Chester and their elected officials that decide these things. And I didn't want anyone to think that I don't care about them. I do care about them, but it's someone else's responsibility to decide what's right for them. And what I think is wrong is a lot of people have a lot of opinions, but they're self-governed. They elected their elected officials. They made decisions, and I'm not here backseat driving their decisions. And as far as Philadelphia is concerned, if I'm the mayor, if they don't want to do it, then we'll bid it out again, and the work will go to someone else. And that's just it, you know, life. That's just life. It's up to them what they want to do.
Okay.
There's no way to make the trash magically disappear, though. It has to go somewhere.
Well, that's true. And I guess my last question for you is, you've been on the campaign trail for several months. What have you learned while on the campaign trail, and how has the experience of campaigning been from your experience as a business person?
Well,
anything surprised you?
No, I think, you know, I'm an unusual business person in that I have town hall meetings and I spend time in stores talking to my customers. For 35 years, I've been doing it. And, you know, I have a great affection for a lot of people I serve, and we hug each other and greet each other and communicate with each other on social media. And in a lot of ways, campaigning is very similar to what I would do every day anyway, except it's just more people in more neighborhoods. And so I really enjoyed the people part of it. And I really found it very interesting to talk to lots of different people and hear what they had to say and formulate my thoughts based on what I learned. And I've learned an awful lot about, you know, elected officials that do a lot of talking, but don't really implement anything to help the citizens. I've heard that all over the city. And I've learned about the mismanagement of the city. And as I've learned about it, I thought to myself, well, I would have never made that decision. If I were mayor, I could do better for our citizens. And that kind of got me excited to tackle this, because I really think I could help make things better for a lot of people.
Okay, so what do we think?
Okay, first of all, we need to talk about the level of campaign communications in the city and the fact that it is horrendous right now. There are people out here collecting checks from mayoral candidates that need to give people full refunds. And I can come up with no better example of a person who should be trying to get all of their money back than Jeff Brown. Because your campaign communications people are supposed to keep you from doing stuff like basically, repeating things like the ethics commission's probe into my super PAC is a witch hunt. They're supposed to keep you from saying things like that and saying them constantly. And they have not done him any favors. And I really think that, despite the fact that he's a millionaire, you don't want to see anyone get ripped off, but he's getting ripped off here.
And just a word on the ethics board. So years ago, when I first started doing this, I would meet with anybody in government who would meet with me because I wanted to learn as much as I could. I still do that, actually. And ethics board brought me in and said, yeah, we're going to tell you what we do. Here's how it works. They investigate everything and everybody. If they get a tip, they do it. I don't think there's any bias in what they do. I just don't. There's bias in a lot of things. I don't think there is in the ethics board, and that's just my opinion. From what I've seen, and I observe what they do, and I follow them, and I've never seen that. So to say it's politically motivated, that doesn't hold water, because even if it was, right, let's say somebody from another campaign said, hey, this guy's got a problem, the ethics board will look into it. But when you look at the steps the ethics board's taken since they looked into it, I don't think they just go around making things up. And that's just my perspective on that. Vanessa, what did you hear? Oh, you're muted there.
I have a lot of thoughts on Jeff Brown. Obviously, I've been covering the mayoral campaign for the last couple of months. And, just to reiterate and clarify for our viewers and listeners out there, the Philadelphia Board of Ethics is an independent entity, right? They're not working with any campaigns. And so the notion that it's politically motivated, or as Jeff Brown stated during last night's debate, is a political hit job, sounding very much like a certain former president, is misleading. The board said that there was an extensive and elaborate scheme to circumvent the city's campaign contribution limits, right? The super PAC that they're accusing him of coordinating with is called For a Better Philadelphia. And so those are the facts. And I agree with Larry. Obviously, the board has to present evidence before they can ask for an injunction. That injunction means that the super PAC can't spend any more money on things like mailers and television ads, etc. Well, what we know about TV advertising is those things have to be paid for in advance and have to be scheduled and programmed in advance. So I do think he might be right in saying that money was already spent. Those ads have already been purchased and they're running. Perhaps it will take another week or two for us to see the impact of cutting off their funds before this gets sorted out. The hearing is scheduled for April 24th. And so many of us reporters and journalists, we are dying to go to that hearing to see what evidence is presented. It's easy for Jeff Brown to say, everything will come out at the hearing, we're going to be exonerated. However, both at the debate last night and at the forum on Monday night at Esperanza, he lashed out and displayed a lot of anger, which, as you know, when somebody's being accused of something and they're very defensive and they lash out like that, it doesn't bode well for their credibility. He actually wasn't asked specifically about the ethics probe at the debate at Esperanza. Instead, he was asked by one of the community members via the moderators whether or not he would be able to disclose who some of these donors are affiliated with the dark money and this super PAC. He did a couple of things which I think were very uncomfortable for people in the audience. The first thing is he acted like he did not understand the moderator who is a Mexican woman with an accent who speaks perfect English, doing this in North Philadelphia at a Latinx agency in front of a mostly Latino audience was very offensive. Everyone could understand her. I confirmed this with people in the audience. Like, did you understand the question? And they're like, of course we did. He might have been trying to buy time, in which case he should have asked for her to repeat the question instead of saying, I didn't understand what you said, which again is very offensive and implying that just because they have an accent, they're not to be understood. She repeated the question, again, asking about whether or not he would reveal the dark money donors. And instead of answering that question, he took it to be a direct question about the ethics probe, in which this is how he lashed out in anger and talked about it being politically motivating. And he said something to the extent of, they all do it. Everybody here has had problems. Now, that's partially true. I did some looking, and I found a Philadelphia Citizen article, which actually came out last week, which details some of the Board of Ethics violations other candidates have had. So in the Philadelphia Citizen, they say that Alan Dom was fined $2,000 by the Board of Ethics because he didn't disclose the conflict of interest regarding a property he owned in his financial disclosure forms and abstained from council measures related to it. Helen Gim in 2015 was the recipient of $11,500 contribution from the American Federation of Teachers Pennsylvania PAC. As you know, AFT is a big supporter of Helen Gim. The ethics board was saying that this was some kind of illegal pass-through in order to get around campaign finance limits, and she was fined $1,500 and had a settlement agreement. And then lastly, the article states that Maria Quiñones Sanchez paid $8,500 in ethics code violations committed during the 2015 election. During that same election, Derek Green was found to have violated city ethics laws 4 times and paid a $1,200 fine. And so when Jeff Brown says other people are doing it, he's right. They all have had problems like this. However, the amount of money that the ethics board is looking to fine Jeff Brown is over $100,000, which speaks to the extent of the problem or the alleged violation. And so I think it's quite normal for people to make mistakes in their campaign finance reports. We come to expect that, and they all pay small fines. But Helen Gim sort of alluded to this during the forum on Monday, where this particular violation is very unusual, this coordination with a giant super PAC that has an enormous amount of money, and that none of us have been accused of doing that. And with that, she is definitely right. So again, we'll have to wait and see what evidence is presented in order to understand the extent of this accusation. Certainly, they interviewed people affiliated with his campaign, asking more about the communications that they've had with super PACs. So probably those interviews revealed some information that we don't know yet. So like I said, all of that will come out in the hearing on the 24th. Just to review Jeff Brown's month of scandals, for lack of better words, he had problems earlier in the year with a campaign video, which was seen by many as very racist. He was caught on video using the word lynching, which is very inappropriate and very offensive and harmful, especially given that several of his competitors are Black candidates for mayor. A mailer that was floating around this week also has very offensive racist imagery. It has a Black man named Nazir from North Philly, pictured saying, "Nah, bro." It's just, again, I agree with Denise. You wonder who is making some of these decisions when it comes to the marketing materials, and also who's coaching him during these debates. There's a clip from the Fox 29 interview from last night where he's talking to either an activist or a reporter. It's not clear. And he was very dismissive of the people of Chester. And he says, If a problem, then make it illegal. It's legal to do so. And so if people don't want this, they should pass a law. And the activist says, well, what about the people of Chester? Don't you find it problematic that the city has a contract like this that's, exploiting the poverty and the people of Chester who really can't afford to say no to this type of contracts? And he just says the same thing, like, well, it's not me who decided. It was other people. He used the same line on Monday's forum in his closing arguments, where he was again stating, all these people have been in power. All these people had their chance. And so again, sounding very much like a certain former president at speaking in anger, raising his voice and making the audience feel very uncomfortable. I don't know what's happening with his campaign. He's obviously trying to put on a facade that everything is going well in that interview with Denise. But I think the perception from the public and from a lot of journalists is that campaign is quickly going off the rails.
So I did want to follow up a little bit with the history of the ethics board. I mean, I don't share other people's opinion that the ethics board is even-handed. Let me give some concrete examples. When former council member Heenan was convicted because he had a job with a union and is going to go to jail, the ethics board didn't investigate former council member Green, who had a job with a law firm, didn't investigate council member Brian O'Neill, who has a job with a law firm. The ethics board didn't complain when former council member Alan Dom voted on real estate taxes and on assessments. And he clearly had a conflict of interest. And the best example I can give is the ethics board is completely silent when former controller Rebecca Reinhardt has former Mayor Nutter endorsing her on her television commercials. The ethics board is fine with that, even though we all know that Rebecca Reinhardt is paying former Mayor Street for that endorsement. It's right there on the campaign records how much money former Mayor Street is being paid by Rebecca Reinhardt. And the ethics board turns a blind eye to that. They don't require her to put a disclosure on her ad saying this is a paid endorsement. If she were selling something on late night television that was going to get you to lose weight and she had someone saying this product works, they would have to list it's a paid endorsement. So I don't come to the conclusion that the ethics board is blind to politics and blind to the power structure. They may be absolutely right, but I think it should be even-handed. I think they should look at all the candidates, and I think they should protect all of us, not just send to jail a union member who was paid by his union, but send to jail a lawyer who's paid by his law firm, send to jail a developer who's paying himself while voting on all these things. It shouldn't be we're only going to hold one person's feet to the fire. It should be even-handed, and everybody should have the same level of scrutiny.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. Yeah, I agree with that. Vanessa, you're muted there.
Yeah, no, a lot of people have had questions about Rebecca Reinhardt's affiliation with John Street. He is on her payroll. He does go to her campaign headquarters and actually works with her. And that's not something that you see typically as somebody who is an employee of the campaign go on TV to give an endorsement. It's not clear if it's in really fine print, very, very small, like at the end. But seemingly they haven't lodged an ethics campaign violation against her for that. I mean, my personal opinion is that, I feel that they're not even-handed. My point was that they are an independent organization, and Jeff Brown's phrasing of it saying that this is, because of these other campaigns, I don't think is right. There might be people on that board out to get him, but I don't think that the campaigns are coordinating with the ethics board in order to take him out. Maybe they are, but present some evidence to that if you're going to make that claim.
I don't want to be an apologist for Jeff Brown. I just want to say there are obvious violations that go on in the city on a regular basis, and only some people get prosecuted and other people get a free ride. If you're a union member and you're paid for by the union, that's illegal to also be in city council. If you're a lawyer and you're paid for by your law firm, that's legal. Someone should explain that in very small words, why it's all right to be a lawyer and get a paycheck from a big law firm, but it's not all right to get a paycheck from a labor union. And when the ethics board can explain that, when they can explain how they can let Rebecca Reinhart pay someone to be an endorser and not force her to put a disclosure on her campaign ad, but they can go after someone who somehow has had negotiations or participated with a super fund, then I'm open to say they're even-handed. But until that happens, I don't believe it.
Okay. And the other big news that we had this week happened on Sunday. Former Councilmember Maria Cunas-Sanchez withdrew from the mayor's race. We interviewed her on Monday, Denise and I, to talk about that decision. And also, I like asking questions like, what's it like to run for mayor? So we got to talk a little bit about that as well. So here's our interview with Maria Cunas-Sanchez.
Okay, welcome to this week's edition of Hall Monitor. I'm Denise Clay-Murray. I'm here with Larry McGlynn, and we are being joined by former City Council member Maria Cunas-Sanchez, who was one of the 11 people running for the Democratic nomination for mayor. But on Sunday, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported that she was suspending her campaign, and for a reason that actually makes a lot of sense to those of us who have been following campaign finance reform or the lack thereof for a while now. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk through a little bit of this experience, this journey.
So I guess my first question for you is, what ultimately made you decide that despite all of the effort that you had put into it, that maybe, it was time to, suspend your campaign?
So thank you. I mean, that, let's unpack that a little bit. I signed up for a campaign. We thought 4 or 5, maybe 6 people in the race. Understanding the historic moment of the 100th mayor, understood that there'd be 4 qualified women in the race. Then, we get into this race and there's 11 candidates, 2 billionaires, couple people with access to millions. And it was not only a crowded field, but it was really hard to break through, even with the numerous campaign forums, right? And so I felt a responsibility to the folks that I represent and who I wanted to give a voice to, and the donors who are supporting me, that when those reports were filed on Wednesday, we knew that people had changed the name of this game. And the fact is that City Hall is up for sale, and there's some people with a lot of money willing to buy it.
So when you say that City Hall is up for sale and there are people willing to buy it, what were you hearing from potential donors when you would talk to them about contributing to your campaign?
So, first, I want to acknowledge, and I'm incredibly grateful for all the people that gave us. We had over 500 donors and we raised $800,000. And under normal circumstances, if everyone was in that range of, 800 to, $1 million, $1.5 million, which is what a race like this should normally cost, I think we could have been more competitive. But when you're talking to donors who are very gracious and very supportive, and that based on Wednesday's reporting, you have self-funded folks and folks with access to a lot of money who are willing to put a whole lot more money, making this the most expensive race our city has seen. I had a responsibility to the supporters and the donors to say, as much as you're giving and you will continue to give, we can't compete.
Did that, because, those of us who have been looking at campaign finance and also looking at some of the other issues in the city, like, for example, your favorite trash man couldn't get on the ballot. And he said, this is no longer a venue for working class people. How disappointed were you to find that out firsthand?
So I'm not, again, I'm not disappointed in my supporters and the folks who've given me money. I think, again, there's never been a candidate like me, an Afro-Latina, who's raised this amount of money. So I am incredibly grateful. But I think one of the reasons I supported public finance legislation in the past is because, with Citizens United, it's going to be even more challenging for voices and people like me to run unless they have access to those heavyweight donor base, right? Who can create these super PACs. And so that's why I've supported public financing. Furthermore, this election has demonstrated that we should also reform our election code around ranked voting, because the field is so crowded. And so hopefully a responsible person will win the mayoral race. I'll take the next few days and see how the candidates embrace my agenda, and consider whether I'm going to endorse someone. But whatever I do, the next 30 plus days, I'm going to get out into the streets and get the Latinos and my supporters to come out and vote, because they can make a decision where a race is going to be won on several percentage points. This community needs to come out and vote so they are seen and heard.
So can you get into a little bit about the Agenda Latina? Because they talk a little bit about it in the story I read, but I kind of like a little more depth. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think it's the things I've been talking about. We'll start with public safety because that's what everything polls, right? And everybody's responding to public safety based on their polls. I'm the only candidate that really talked about how do we make neighborhoods look safe, through infrastructure investment, not through police, right? Yes, we need police, but we need, we know where the next crime is going to happen. We know that because we don't have cameras, we don't have good lighting, we have blight. There are many things mayor can do to make those intersections that have become hotbeds for crime safer, through things that have nothing to do with police. And there's a failure to acknowledge that and just do it, right? That was one of the things we were talking about the first 100 days. So for me, having someone embrace that they're going to make sure that these neighborhoods look safe, so that people can believe and feel that they are safe is hugely important. And I've done a lot of panels and I've not heard people really speak to it the way that I have. Some of the poverty work that we've been doing, people in this campaign talk about equity and governing for all. But the fact of the matter is we can't move forward in an equitable way if we don't readdress some of the disinvestment that historically has happened. And so when you say, I'm going to govern for all, but you are not willing to say, I'm going to readdress the lack of investment in certain neighborhoods, we can't move forward together because we're not equal. We're not at the same place, right? Neighborhoods are not at the same place. So I want to hear the candidates speak a little bit more depth in that. And then, when it comes to transformative legislation, we've done a lot of great things about income-based payment plans, on affordable housing, on land reform, and others that I want to see candidates speak to, and why that's important. The next mayor, as I've said on the trail, will build out the city over the next decade. Is it going to be a city that includes Black and brown people like me, or are we building a city for those who are coming?
Okay. Now, you said you're going to take like the next month to kind of figure out what you want to do in terms of an endorsement. Have any of your fellow candidates approached you already?
Yeah, I mean, I've either directly or indirectly, all of the campaigns have reached out. Some people I've talked to directly, people that I'm more aligned with. We've had direct conversations. I want folks to publicly commit to the agenda that I've put forward so that they can be publicly held accountable for it, right? Because this is not a commitment to me, it's to the people who I was speaking on behalf of and wanting to give voice to. So, people have to feel that folks are committed to them in the same way that I was committed to them before I make a final decision on that. But I understand the historic nature of this campaign, what is at stake. And I'm not going to come this far not to be able to influence, right, as much as I possibly can with my political equity, who wins.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm going to give you to Larry McGlynn, and we're still listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
All right, thank you very much, Denise. So what I would like to talk a little bit about is, and we get questions about this from people, the actual structure of a mayoral campaign. So before you even get started, how do you imagine that you're going to put this massive operation together?
So it's real important, those of us who've run for election before know that you kind of need a kitchen cabinet and you need skill sets that you don't have, right? You build a team around what are your strengths and also what are your weaknesses so that you can have a really comprehensive amount of knowledge, working knowledge, and muscle behind what you're doing. So, all of us for years have been talking about the possibilities and looking at, what is your donor base? Obviously, for a candidate like me, the donor base is not as extensive as people who run citywide in the past. And so we always knew going in that we were going to have to work that space harder, and we're prepared to do that. But building a team of folks, there's an incredible amount of people in the city of Philadelphia who just love this city, understand the historic moment in which we're living, and believe that the city can get out of being the poorest city and be more equitable and more just for everyone. And so, surrounding yourself with those types of folks to talk through messaging about what you'd like to see, that it's not aspirational and it's not a policy we've read, but using my lived experience, the work that I've already done to influence, right, what you do, and how you try to connect with people was hugely important. Since my days in council, I've always believed in surrounding myself with very, very smart people who had the freedom to challenge me and make me better because of that. And I've been very lucky on this campaign to have that also. Have a lot of friends around the table, but friends who can be honest and hold me to a standard around thinking bigger and bolder than ever before. So from day one, I was out of my comfort zone, but I embraced that because I had a really strong base of support, not to mention, a wonderful husband and children who have always supported me.
So leading up to when you make the announcement that running for mayor, resigning for council, were there certain things that you felt I have to have these things in place, or at least have a really good idea, donors, staffing, that kind of thing? Otherwise, maybe I don't do this now.
So, particularly, as I recovered from my cancer journey, the political pundits, immediately start counting you out and saying, "Oh, no, she's not running because of cancer." And for me, I use the cancer journey to center me around why the here and now is important, because tomorrow's not promised, right? And if you want to have an impact, you have to lean into that. And so I did, even through the journey where I had an opportunity to say, given this situation, I don't want to run. It really centered me and recommitted me to what I wanted to do. And then you're looking at, who are your potential supporters, who will support you. I mean, I had, wonderful people like Judith von Zelznick, who is the chairwoman of one of the most prestigious search firms in the country, whose job is to find executives, right? And so for someone like her to sign on to the campaign and say, you're the leader for a city was very important to me. People like Wendell Pritchett, as he stepped away from his duties as interim president of University of Pennsylvania, who had been a chief of staff to a previous mayor. When you have folks like that saying, yes, Maria, I think you have the right combination of skills and lived experience, right, to make this work. That comes with talking to people, talking through with people, and building that kind of energy. And then, the team, Megan, who had worked for me in city council, who joined me on this side, has evolved and an incredible policy wonk person who understood how I thought and came forward. So I've been very lucky and very blessed with the people that have always surrounded me. And it's partly because they know how hard I work, when I make a decision, and they know that my commitment is people.
So what is that day-to-day like? when you're running all across the city trying to get all these things done?
So, you do call time and you meet with people, and then you do call time again, and then you go somewhere and you come back and you do call time again. So there's a lot of phone calling all day long. But I'll tell you, going around the city and Southwest Philly, Northeast, and other places, and having people say to you, you're the fighter, right? We know you because when we see you fighting, was very important for me, right? To feel that sense of you get us, you see us, you're being authentic. You're not saying anything on the campaign trail that's different from neighborhood to neighborhood, and you're just as bold as you've been on city council. That was important to me because I wanted people in the city to see that I was them, right? I lived every challenge that many of them are living or have lived. But I also understand the opportunities that we have as a city. And that was, for me, the most gratifying part of this campaign was getting out of the district and understanding that people outside of the district who have benefited from a lot of the work that I've done, that they also knew who I was and were willing to listen to the message.
So you told us kind of what your immediate future is going to be, but a little longer term, where do you think your skill set and your talents are best placed? Can you give us a little indication of maybe what you're looking to do next?
So, I want to continue to have community impact. I'm very lucky and very blessed, right? I can pick what I want to do next. I've been an executive, I've been a journalist, I've been an educator, I've done a little bit of everything. So I want to give myself a little bit of time and spend some time with my wonderful husband and children and grandchildren. But I can assure you that my chapter 2 is going to be even more impactful than my chapter 1, because I feel like I have a lot to give. And this city needs leadership, right? And serving in government is not the only place where you can provide leadership and have impact. And I've seen that firsthand, and I'm prepared to continue to do some of this work.
All right, I'd like to bring back Denise Clay-Murray here on Philadelphia Home Monitor.
Yes, thank you. I have one more question that is something that I've kind of been following around, since Hillary Clinton ran for president. And that is the fact that you are a woman trying to raise money, to participate in politics, and particular a woman of color trying to do it. Did you have like any kind of, I guess I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask the question, did you find yourself having to work a little harder than some of your male colleagues to get people who wouldn't, normally just say, oh, well, this person's a leader, let's put them in the office, to acknowledge that about you? Because, even though there's a whole bunch of women in this race, the specter of sexism is still kind of out there. And I was wondering if you had dealt with that during your campaign.
Oh, absolutely. The gender bias is real. The fact that you have 4 highly qualified women, but the men, continue to believe that they're better and could be better leaders than us is very problematic and speaks to the gender bias that still exists. But even within within the group of women, you have women who come from, middle class and more privileged backgrounds, right? So, as an Afro-Latina, and I'm sure, Sherelle Parker feels the same way. We always have to be better. We always have to work harder, right? So we didn't get in the game to whine about it. It is how we've gotten in the game and how we've been able to stay in the game, always knowing that we have to outperform and outwork everyone else to get, the same kind of attention that others get who walk different halls and are in different spaces that we're not always don't always have access to. So it's still a reality. It's a reality for women, but it's particularly a reality for Black and brown women in our society, and something that we have to continue to work at. I have never met a Black or brown woman not ready for that challenge when they get in this. They know that, because you can't get in this space without having confronted that, every single day, sometimes very direct, sometimes subtly. The fact that in this race you had male counterparts talking about that they would hire us, right? I don't know how many times they've said that.
Yeah, that was kind of my favorite part of the whole thing.
It's like we need a job. As I've said, I was on a mission. I am on a mission, and that's why even as I exit center stage, I do that with an agenda that I need other folks to embrace. I'm not going to meet the moment and understand who I'm trying to represent and who needs representation and to be heard and seen in the city.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Former Councilmember Maria Quinones Sanchez, former Democratic candidate for mayor, and good luck to you. And we will definitely be reaching out to you because we're going to continue to follow particularly poverty and how it's going to be dealt with in the city as part of this mayor's race. So we will definitely be reaching out.
Thank you so very much. Thank you for your coverage.
All right. We'd like to thank Maria Quinones Sanchez for being with us. So Vanessa, let me come to you first. What are your thoughts on what the former candidate had to say? And, does it make sense?
Well, let me just say first that, she deserves an incredible amount of respect, right? And any woman of color with her tenure and status trying to run for mayor has an incredible challenge ahead of them. And she held her own in that race. And she had a lot of support and a lot of good ideas. So I want to lead with that, right? Because I want to give credit where credit is due. But I've also been following the race really closely. And I can tell you several things, right? The first thing is that this notion that she is putting all of the blame on dark money and big super PACs and buying the election as the sole reason for her leaving is just a bit disingenuous. And although I agree with the points that she's making, certainly many people are concerned about the incredible amount of money being spent on this election. And rightfully so, with the Citizens United, it has really opened the floodgates for dark money coming from unknown places injected into this race. And it does make it unfair. So I do agree with her. However, the reality of the matter is that Maria was unable to get any endorsements, with the exception of the Latino Victory Fund. She was considered a progressive candidate, but really couldn't get endorsements from progressive organizations in the way her main competitor, Helen Gim, did. And so the idea that she couldn't compete because she didn't have any money, or couldn't compete with the level of money that the Alan Doms and the Jeff Browns put into the race, doesn't account for the Sherelle Parkers and the Helen Gims, who are not wealthy women. They're working class women, and yet they were able to get lots of endorsements and lots of support from grassroots organizations that she just was unable to do that. The other thing is that she didn't perform well at these debates. I mean, she rarely got applause or excitement from the crowd in the ways that other candidates often did. She's not the best public speaker, or at least she just wasn't able to energize people in maybe the ways that she was able to do as a city council person. When she was in city council District 7, she didn't have the support of the Democratic Party or, the establishment apparatus. That also worked against her. My sources, and there are many, have all said similar things about the ward leaders and committee people shifting their support to Sherelle Parker. Tomorrow at Norris Square, there is an event. They were giving out flyers for this event at Esperanza on Monday, Latinos for Sherelle Parker. I found that to be really interesting, that in District 7, right, where Maria governed, that they were going to have an endorsement event and committee people were giving out those flyers. So other forces are at play here when it comes to her abandoning her campaign. And though I agree that it is hard to compete with the millionaires and billionaires, you have to have buy-in from the community. And the reality is that Maria has always been a divisive candidate, even within Latinos. Being a progressive candidate meant that she didn't have the support of more conservative or moderate Latino voters. And it was really hard for her to get the backing of a lot of organizations that are canvassing and doing work for progressive voters. So organizations like Working Family Party and Reclaim and Democratic Socialists America have all gone with Helen Gim. And so in a lot of ways, it was splitting the progressive vote. So I'm not surprised to see her leave the campaign. I wish her well. I think the Latina agenda is very valuable, although a lot of those things she had the opportunity to implement while she was city councilor. So it's interesting that she's coming out with that now. Only 2 candidates affirmed or said that they would work with that Latina agenda. Sherelle Parker said that she affirmed it, and Rebecca Reinhart said that she would absolutely like to work with Maria on that Latina agenda. Oddly enough, Warren Bloom, who is kind of a funny character running for city council, said that he would make Maria Quinones Sanchez his deputy director, which of course insulted her, and she responded by saying, like, that's absolutely absurd. But many of the other candidates said that they would advise with her, consult with her. So it will be interesting to see where she winds up, although I think it's unlikely she'll wind up in the administration of one of the other candidates. If I had to guess or predict who she might endorse, if that Latinos for Sherelle Parker event is any indication, we'll have to wait and see if she pops up there tomorrow. So we'll see. But I wish her luck. I hate to see a Latino candidate not make it until the end. But it's no surprise there. Like I said, her debate, her forum showings were pretty lackluster at best.
And Vanessa makes a very good point. I've never seen anyone never get the endorsement of Democratic City Committee. But Maria Quinones Sanchez never, even as an incumbent. And this is a group of people that endorsed Shaka Fattah when he was under indictment. So the fact that they never endorsed her, I was always fascinated by that.
And she had a lot of difficulties just in general. She was coming from the 7th district council member, hadn't run citywide, an area of the city that has low voter turnout, so low support going into it. And just like what Vanessa and Denise said, not being able to get those endorsements early on, the fundraising is always a challenge no matter what. The odds were stacked against her, and this is where it ended up. If the field had been smaller, do you think she would have had a better shot?
I don't think she could have ever competed with Helen Gim, to be honest, as long as Helen was in the race. She is just dominating the progressive vote. I think it's the same challenge Rebecca Reinhart faces. Although Rebecca Reinhart certainly has the financial backing to go toe-to-toe with Helen Gim. But no, I don't think that having a second progressive candidate like Helen Gim compete against Maria would have made it even if it were a smaller field. Now, if Helen were not in the race, maybe, but again, you have to have those endorsements. You have to have a volunteer army. You have to have a much bigger campaign apparatus than what Maria had. So unfortunately, I don't think it was her time. I'm almost certain we'll see her pop up again doing something interesting.
Right. Just to give you an idea of what that volunteer army looks like, I live in West Philadelphia, and I had Helen Gim canvassers come to my house the other day. I haven't seen any other mayoral canvassers, and I don't think I will. So that's interesting. We only have about a minute left. Denise, last word on this?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned canvassers. I mean, if you want to see a whole bunch of Jeff Brown signs, you can find them at Enon Baptist Church on the way to the Black Media Matters Forum, which is tomorrow at Enon Baptist Church. And I'm pretty sure that you can still get a seat because Enon is like the largest church I've ever been in my entire life. So,
all right, well, sorry, Denise. Next week on the show, Lance Haver will be back to do his report, and we'll see you next week on Hall Monitor.